Welcome to my true crime channel. Today we'll dive into a case that shocked America, the trunk murders, involving Winnie Ruth Judd. In 1931, Winnie was accused of killing her two friends and attempting to transport their bodies in trunks. This case gripped the nation with its sensational details and raised questions about mental health that echoed through the courtroom. Join me as we uncover the chilling events, trial drama, and the lasting mystery behind this infamous crime. In October 1931, a shocking murder case rocked Phoenix, Arizona. The central figure in this dark tale was Winnie Ruth Judd, a young medical secretary. Her name quickly became the focus of national attention as she was dubbed the Trunk Murderess. This nickname stemmed from her arrival in Los Angeles by train with several large trunks, which contained not ordinary luggage, but the dismembered bodies of her two closest friends, Agnes LeRoi and Hedvig Samuelson. Winnie had enjoyed a close friendship with Agnes and Hedvig, but their relationship soured over time, leading to escalating tensions. On the night of October 16, 1931, these simmering conflicts erupted in a small apartment in Phoenix. A fierce argument ensued, ultimately culminating in murder. Winnie shot Agnes and bludgeoned Hedvig to death. Even more chillingly, she dismembered Hedvig's body in a desperate attempt to conceal her crimes, stuffing the remains into trunks bound for Los Angeles. However, her plan unraveled almost immediately. Upon arriving in Los Angeles, train station staff noticed blood seeping from the trunks, prompting an investigation by the police. Winnie was swiftly arrested, and the case captured nationwide attention, not just for its brutality, but also for its intricate web of emotions and psychological issues. The public and media were enthralled, particularly with discussions surrounding Winnie's motives and mental state, which continued for years. Every detail of the case was steeped in suspense and unease, making Winnie Ruth Judd's story one of the most chilling criminal narratives of the early 20th century. Winnie Ruth Judd was born on January 29, 1905, in Indiana, to a typical family. Her father was a pastor, and her mother was a homemaker. Although she grew up in what seemed to be a stable environment, her childhood was far from easy. Her family life was constrained by her father's strict religious rules, which created a sense of repression and confinement. From a young age, Winnie displayed intelligence and empathy, quickly learning how to meet the expectations of others. She eventually became a medical secretary, which granted her a degree of independence, and she maintained good relationships with patients and colleagues. However, her personal life was less satisfactory. In her 20s, she married Dr. William Judd, who was significantly older and struggled with drug addiction and alcoholism. Winnie often faced life's pressures alone, as her marriage lacked support and happiness. The deterioration of her marriage and her ongoing misfortunes began to accumulate, and her mental state grew increasingly fragile. While living in Phoenix, she befriended Agnes LeRoi and Hedvig Samuelson, who soon became her close friends. At first, their friendship seemed warm and close-knit, but the complex emotions lurking beneath this relationship ultimately sowed the seeds of tragedy. Meanwhile, Winnie was involved in an ambiguous relationship with a wealthy doctor named Jack Halsman. Reports suggest that the tension among Winnie, Agnes, and Hedvig partially stemmed from their romantic entanglements with Jack. Winnie's relationship with Jack was fraught with uncertainty and anxiety, which added further pressure to her already unstable mental state. She gradually descended into extreme anxiety and unease. Winnie Ruth Judd's friendship with Agnes LeRoi and Hedvig Samuelson initially appeared strong and close. The three women frequently socialized in Phoenix, finding solace in each other's company. They often gathered at the apartment shared by Hedvig and Agnes, enjoying the little joys of social life together. However, over time, cracks began to show in this friendship. Tensions gradually escalated, creating a noticeable divide between the three, ultimately leading to a tragedy that would change their lives forever. The breakdown of their friendship stemmed primarily from two factors: a complex love triangle and an increasingly deteriorating trust. First, Winnie was involved in a flirtation with a wealthy doctor, Jack Holzman. This relationship was not exclusive to Winnie, as rumors suggested that Jack also had some level of interaction with Agnes. This emotional entanglement became a significant rift in their relationship. Winnie felt jealousy and suspicion towards Agnes, leading to a growing distrust that festered over time. The dependency and insecurity Winnie felt towards Jack only heightened her sensitivity, making her increasingly resentful. As the emotional situation became more complex, the relationship between Winnie and Agnes became tenser. Agnes was a confident and sociable person, often the center of attention, while Winnie often felt left out. This growing sense of insecurity and jealousy began to sour Winnie's feelings toward Agnes, leading her to believe that Agnes not only was taking Jack away from her, but also sought to control her relationship with Hedvig. While Winnie and Hedvig's friendship had been strong, it started to fray as Winnie projected her animosity towards Agnes onto Hedvig, suspecting her of siding with Agnes. As these emotions piled up, the interactions among the three women became increasingly strained. Arguments became more frequent, particularly regarding Jack. Winnie felt increasingly ostracized by her two friends, believing they were conspiring against her. Her emotional outbursts and psychological pressure intensified within this environment, while Agnes and Hedvig seemed unaware of how serious Winnie's emotional struggles had become. The breakdown of their friendship was not only driven by emotional conflicts, but also highlighted lifestyle differences and value discrepancies. Agnes and Hedvig lived more freely, enjoying social outings and entertainment, while Winnie, constrained by her marital situation, could not indulge in the same carefree lifestyle. She often felt out of place among them, and this sense of disconnection led her to withdraw from the group. On the evening of October 16, 1931, Winnie Ruth Judd decided to visit the apartment of her friends Agnes LeRoi and Hedvig Samuelson. Her heart was filled with anger and anxiety as suppressed emotions finally erupted that night. The three women had gathered in the apartment, where a heated argument broke out. Tensions quickly escalated, with Winnie's emotions spiraling out of control. The conflict stemmed from long-standing jealousy and resentment. Winnie had become increasingly upset over Agnes's relationship with a wealthy doctor, Jack Holzman, feeling that Agnes was stealing the affection that she believed was hers. As words were exchanged, tensions rose, and the friendship that had once been solid began to crumble. In a fit of rage, Winnie drew a handgun that she had brought with her. The emotions of tension and anxiety boiled over into a violent act. She fired several shots at Agnes, who collapsed to the floor, dying instantly. Hedvig, witnessing the horror unfold, attempted to intervene, but Winnie struck her down with a blunt instrument, killing her as well. But Winnie did not stop there. In a desperate attempt to cover up her crimes, she began to dispose of the bodies. She decided to pack the remains of her friends into trunks, preparing to transport them to Los Angeles. Because Hedvig's body was larger, Winnie dismembered it to fit it more easily into the trunk. After carefully packing the two trunks, she locked them up, planning to escape to California by train the following day. On October 18th, Winnie boarded a train to Los Angeles, seemingly confident that she could evade capture. However, fate was not on her side. Upon arrival at the Los Angeles train station, staff noticed blood seeping from the trunks and a foul odor emanating from them. The police were alerted and soon began investigating the suspicious luggage. When the trunks were opened, authorities discovered the bodies of two women, one intact and one dismembered, thus revealing Winnie's heinous crimes. When Winnie Ruth Judd's trunk was discovered at the Los Angeles train station, the bloodstains and foul odor immediately drew the attention of the station staff. The police were promptly alerted, and upon arrival they found two bodies, one intact and the other dismembered. The victims were quickly identified as Agnes LeRoi and Hedvig Samuelson, two of Winnie's close friends. As the trunk murder case gained national attention, it became a sensational topic in the media. The police began their search for Winnie, who had already left the train station. After some effort, she was arrested at a residence in Los Angeles. Although she appeared calm, fear loomed beneath the surface. During her initial interrogation, Winnie claimed she was innocent and attempted to blame a mysterious man, but the police were skeptical of her statements. Authorities then proceeded to search Winnie's residence in Phoenix as well as Agnes and Hedvig's apartment. They found clear signs of a struggle, including bullet holes and bloodstains, which indicated that violence had indeed occurred there. Winnie's fingerprints were also found at the crime scene, further establishing her direct connection to the murders. Through their investigation, the police uncovered the complicated dynamics between Winnie and the victims, particularly the romantic entanglement with Dr. Jack Holzman. Winnie's relationship with Jack was seen as a key motive for the deterioration of her friendships with Agnes and Hedvig, adding an emotional layer to the case. As the investigation deepened, the police learned more about how Winnie handled the bodies. The method of dismembering Hedvig's corpse while appearing hasty indicated some level of premeditation. Winnie's attempt to conceal the crime by transporting the bodies to another city provided further evidence that she was trying to evade legal consequences. Additionally, police inquiries revealed more details. The handgun used in the shooting matched personal belongings of Winnie, and she could not offer a credible explanation for her innocence. Eyewitness accounts and neighbor testimonies confirmed the sounds of a heated argument between Winnie and the victims on the night of the incident, making her defenses increasingly implausible. As the investigation progressed, Winnie gradually lost her ability to defend herself. Under the weight of the evidence, she eventually confessed to her crimes, claiming that she had acted out of mental illness. The police submitted the case to court, and Winnie was charged with murder, facing a long and arduous trial ahead. Winnie Ruth Judd's trial was highly publicized from the start, with the media quickly labeling her the trunk murderess. Throughout the trial, her demeanor fluctuated between calmness and confusion, drawing public interest regarding her mental state. Her defense attorney aimed to argue that Winnie was insane, claiming that she lacked full legal responsibility at the time of the crime. The courtroom was rife with heated debates over whether she had a mental illness, especially regarding her accountability for her actions. A focal point of the trial was her mental state on the night of the murders. The defense emphasized that Winnie had long struggled with psychological issues, suggesting she acted violently while mentally disturbed. Testimonies from doctors diagnosed Winnie with tendencies toward schizophrenia, providing the defense with a strong basis. They sought to convince the jury that Winnie committed the murders during a state of insanity. In contrast, the prosecution firmly believed Winnie's actions were premeditated. They pointed out her composed behavior after the murders, including her attempts to dispose of the bodies and escape, indicating she fully understood her actions and sought to cover up her crime. The prosecution argued that her conduct did not align with the definition of insanity, calling for her to bear full responsibility for the double homicide. In a dramatic courtroom moment, Winnie's behavior fluctuated between breakdowns and moments of composure, complicating the case further. After several days of deliberation, the jury found her guilty. But due to the controversy surrounding her mental state, Winnie was ultimately sentenced to death, later commuted to life imprisonment. Despite being sentenced to life in prison, Winnie Ruth Judd did not resign herself to fate. In 1939, she successfully escaped from a psychiatric hospital in Arizona, triggering a nationwide manhunt. During her escape, Winnie lived a relatively quiet life for several years, even finding work in San Francisco under an alias. However, in 1952, police finally located her, leading to her recapture and return to custody. This series of events once again placed Winnie in the spotlight, adding to the legendary status of her case. Winnie Ruth Judd spent decades in prison, but her case was far from over. As time passed, public attitudes toward her mental health and the crimes she committed began to shift. She was transferred between prisons and mental hospitals multiple times, continually filing for parole. After several failed attempts, she was finally granted parole in 1971. By this time, she was in her 70s and in poor health. After her parole, Winnie Ruth Judd began her later life in California. By then, she was 75 years old, and after decades of imprisonment, her health had noticeably declined. Despite the notoriety from her past, she sought to lead a low-profile life, away from public scrutiny. Winnie settled in a quiet community, trying to avoid drawing attention. She often reflected on her complex past, but chose not to discuss the violence and pain she had endured. Friends and family supported her in adapting to her new life, helping her rebuild social connections while remaining cautious. She enjoyed participating in community activities and developed friendships within the neighborhood. Although some remained curious about her history, most people opted for acceptance and understanding. In her later years, Winnie experienced a relatively peaceful time, free from the court battles and prison life. Winnie passed away in 1998 at the age of 93. Her life was marked by tumult and struggle, but in her final years, she found a semblance of tranquility, finally shedding the shadows of her past. The story of Winnie Ruth Judd concludes as a complex legend of friendship, betrayal, and redemption. The case of Winnie Ruth Judd left a profound impact on the American legal system and society. This murder case not only revealed the complexities of interpersonal relationships, but also sparked discussions about mental health and legal responsibility. Winnie's story prompted a reevaluation of the role of mental illness in crime, especially in violent acts. As the case gained exposure, widespread media coverage turned Winnie into the public's trunk murderess. This label affected her life and reflected society's perceptions of female criminals, particularly those with mental health issues. Many saw in her story a challenge to women's identity and societal expectations. Winnie's case also led the legal community to pay closer attention to mental health issues in similar trials. In the years that followed, the legal system began to acknowledge the importance of mental health in sentencing and defense strategies. This shift had lasting effects on many future cases, offering a more humane approach for defendants with mental health challenges. Overall, Winnie Ruth Judd's case was not just a tragic crime event, but also an important example of humanity, psychological health, and legal ethics. It sparked a deeper understanding and discussion of mental illness and paved the way for subsequent social reforms.